Are your bushings busted?
Yeah.
Are your ball joints bollocks? Well, we've got a video for you. Start by jacking up the car and supporting it with jack stands. Turn your steering wheel for access to all the fasteners. As far in advance as possible, spray all your fasteners with some penetrating fluid. This is a lot more important if you have any corrosion on any of the fasteners. Use a 10mm open end wrench to hold the sway bar end link rod just above the bottom bushing. From the bottom of the control arm, use a 12mm deep well socket to remove the bottom link rod nut. Collect the rubber bushings and caps, bag them and tag them. Use a 14mm socket to remove the 2 strut rod nuts from the bottom of the control arm. I used an impact gun, but a long ratchet or breaker bar will do the job too. Remove the 2 17mm steering arm bolts from the bottom of the strut assembly. Turn the steering in the opposite direction so you can get access to the other bolt. And this is where the breaker bar becomes a necessity if you don't have an impact. Castellated nut. Use a pry bar to push the control arm down away from the strut assembly. Use a pair of needle nose pliers to unbend the cotter pin, grab the pin, and tap it out using a hammer. I recommend removing the 22mm ball joint nut with an impact. You can try it with a breaker bar or ratchet, but if the ball joint shaft starts to spin, your only choice is the impact. Put the castellated nut back on the ball joint upside down. Now the fun begins. We're going to separate the ball joint from the steering arm with a ball joint popper. Slide the forked end of the popper between the top of the ball joint and the steering arm. Use a wrench of whatever size fits, mine's 3/4 of an inch. Tighten the threaded shaft until the ball joint shaft breaks free. It's going to go off like a shotgun and scare the heck out of you, so be prepared. Take the castellated nut off the control arm and pull the steering arm away from the ball joint. You don't have to remove the tie rod end. With a 17mm socket, use the windlass gun to remove the control arm bushing bolt. If you're not going to do any plating or powder coating of the bolt, go ahead and put it back where you got it from. Now that we have the control arm free, we can go one of 2 different routes. We can replace the ball joint and control arm bushing, or we can replace the whole control arm with a new one that already has a new ball joint and bushing installed. To get the old ball joint out, we have to remove the snap ring that keeps the ball joint from being pushed out. Pry what's left of the grease boot off the lower part of the ball joint. You might want to clean up the residual grease. Use your snap ring pliers to open the snap ring and use a pick or a flat blade to get under the ring. It can be a little hateful, but keep working at it and it will come off. When you think you're getting close, put a rag over the ring because it can come off with some force and fly off to parts unknown or in your eye. This is a ball joint service kit. You can rent one at a local auto parts store. It has a C-clamp, various cups, receivers, and plates to press with. Mount the C-clamp in a vise or clamp it to a tabletop and open it up. Select a pressing cup and place it on the bottom side of the control arm. make sure the ball joint shaft is as straight up as possible. Put the control arm, pressing cup and plate, into the clamp, use a wrench, and start tightening. Hang onto the control arm and tighten the clamp until the ball joint pops free. To prevent us from crushing our control arm while pressing out the control arm bushing, we need a spacer to fill the gap between the sides of the control arm. Cut a piece of angle just small enough to slip into the control arm and around the bushing. I measured the distance and used a grinder and a cutoff wheel. Don't be afraid to make it a little big, as you can always grind it off to make it fit better. Use a 30mm-ish pressing tube, a backing plate, and a 22mm socket in the C-clamp. Snug it all up and use your wrench to press the bush out of the arm. Don't forget to insert the spacer that we just made. Where's Matthew when I need him? As you can tell, I took the time to clean up my control arm. I sandblasted it back to bare metal, then powder coated it gloss black. Grab your ball joint and select a pressing cup that fits the base of the ball joint. We'll need a plate for that and a receiver to clear the shaft. I'm going to cheat a little bit. I have a 30-ton shop press, and that's what I'm going to use to press the ball joint and the bushing back in. I put a little marine grease on the surface of the ball joint to help it press in smoothly and to protect the metal in case the powder coat gets scratched. Line everything up and drive it home with the press. A shop press is a powerful tool and you can destroy your control arm pretty quickly. Matt and I destroyed a control arm on the Celica with this thing. Take your time and make sure everything is going correctly and you'll be fine. Install the hateful snap ring using your snap ring pliers. Open the ring wide enough to carefully get it past the rubber without damaging it. And now the control arm bushing. Put the spacer we made into the open end of the control arm. Put the bushing into the larger of the two holes in the control arm. I used a thin coat of marine grease again. Use a socket that is just larger than the rubber part of the bush. Mine is 31mm. Keep a close eye on everything and drive the bushing home. Pay attention, make sure the control arm doesn't bend. And here we have one rebuilt control arm. It looks great. Assembly is the reverse of disassembly. Take your time, torque everything back to factory spec. Now enjoy a drive in your pressure handling Corolla.